Let me just thank all the faculty and the staff. I want to thank the Board of Trustee members, and I especially want to thank the woman who just spoke, one of our nation's tremendous educational leaders and advocates and strong voices for not just this great university, but all HBCUs. Thank you very much. And I just want to say to GK behind me, I am proud that he is my chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. I am proud that he and I stand together and work together to protect the great traditions of our nations, the tradition of the historically black college and university. He is an extraordinary man who has not forgotten where he comes from. And I'll tell you this, don't read in any book or Wikipedia page about what GK stands for. In my book, it stands for God knows he is a great man. So this is an awkward situation for me. I am standing here at this great university at a time where my whole family is gathered together. I'm proud that my mother and my brother, my niece, my uncle, aunts, I'm so happy that my family is gathered here. But one of my father's friends teased me that the only reason we're all allowed to come back together now is because the statute of limitations has gone up on what my father did while he was here. My father and my uncle definitely enjoyed this experience. My father is the first in my family lineage on that mighty branch of that tree to go to college. And I'll tell you this, he brought me up not forgetting that truth. He let me know that I am the son of an eagle, and that I would not be on the path that I am if it wasn't for this great university. And I want you all to know this community, this legacy that you all protect and advance, it is the reason why I am standing here today. Without this university, I would not be a senator from New Jersey. I would not be the fourth elected African American to the United States Senate in the history of our country. You see, my father was born under circumstances that he probably statistically should not have made it to college. He was born to a single mother, born poor. He would joke, son, I was born so poor I couldn't afford the other two letters. I was just po, a po boy. I've traced my family history back to slavery, and it was that deep endemic poverty, but yet when his mama couldn't take care of him, it was a community, Hendersonville, North Carolina. It was a community of people that would not let my father fail. People intervened in his life, took care of him. The Pilgrim family brought him into their home as if he was their own child, put food on the table, a roof over his head, gave him discipline and guidance. And when he didn't have college in his eyesight, it was a community of people that said, you are going to college. We are going to bend the arc of your family's history so that our greatest natural resource in this country, in that community, not oil or gas or coal, the greatest natural resource, the genius of our children, the genius of a young man from Hendersonville can be cultivated. Look, my dad, when I was growing up, could have told me this story in a way that was self-aggrandizing, like he was up from nothing. He pulled himself up from his bootstraps like he made it on his own, but he never let me believe that the greatness of this nation is seen in rugged individualism or self-reliance. He told the truth to me, that he is where he is because of love, because of people that recognized our interdependency, that we needed each other. He taught me to understand that rugged individualism and self-reliance are great concepts, but when it comes to the greatness of human achievement, rugged individualism didn't get us to the moon. It didn't map the human genome. It didn't overcome Jim Crow. It didn't get women the right to vote. That was us working together. I will tell you this. My father's themes in life, what he tried to impart to me, was this understanding of our connections to each other. Now, I stand before a group of Eagles ready to graduate who, in many ways, I believe us in Washington, and especially here in the State House in North Carolina, we need to slow down and listen to your wisdom and your truth. You have so much to teach us, to offer this world. And in fact, when it comes to causes of social justice, as I look at you, I know in my heart that history will play true with you. That whether it was uprisings in Soweto and the anti-apartheid movement, whether it was people standing for democracy in China, whether it was any movement for social change like the civil rights movement, it is young people like you that were at the center of those movements for change. This is a time that we need you. But if, given this great honor of my life to stand at my dad's university, I was to impart some wisdom from him, it would be this. My father believed that life was about the big goal and the big ambition. Indeed, he was a man of great ambition. He broke barriers and smashed down doors in his life. In the 9 years from graduating here from NCCU and giving birth to his second son, my father pushed the realms of possibilities, becoming one of the first IBM executives hired for that company, one of the first black salesmen for that company in all of the Virginia area, broke sales records, became one of the top 5% salesmen in the globe. He had so much personal accomplishment, but what he wanted me to understand about life, the way he lived, was that life is not seen in those big accomplishments. It's most made manifest in what you do every single day. My father would teach me, son, there's two ways to go through life. You can go through life as a thermometer or a thermostat. Every day you have that choice. You could be like a thermometer, just reflecting the world that is around you, or you could be a thermostat, one of those people that sets the temperature. You don't have to be one of those people that accepts things as they are. Every day, take responsibility for changing them right where you are. And let me tell you, my dad changed the temperature. I used to witness it. He was a man that showed me that the most important thing that will determine the kind of day you have is your attitude and state of expectation. And he chose an attitude of love, of joy, of laughter in everything he did, and he shared that willingly. He knew, he used to say to me as a salesman, time is money, but I watched how he invested his time and his attention in other people. I could be with my father going to a grocery store, and he would see the person checking out, looking down, and before I knew it, the two of them were engaged in conversations, laughter. My father would have the person sharing their life story as he shared theirs. By the end, he would leave that person lifted. Every moment for my father was a chance to greet this world with goodness, with joy, with hope, with faithfulness, and he did it with everyone. Too many of us go through this life missing the greatness we can do in a moment because we're too busy looking down the road or too caught up in what happened in the road we just passed. And so as a young boy growing up, witnessing this, I began to talk more earnestly with my father as we grew older about this habit of his, to be where he was. He was a man that believed you got to bloom where you are planted. Like that flower on the side of a city sidewalk, it didn't get caught up in dreaming that it was in some field or waiting to be some bouquet. It shared the essence of who it was right there and right then. It did not believe in withholding that truth. My father manifested that authenticity. Now, don't get me wrong, he challenged me to take on the big challenges of this world. And I tell you, graduates, if my father was here, you would hear some of the same thing. That this democracy we are a part of, this world, this nation, is still full of too much injustice. My father would challenge me about the big battles and the big fights, like a broken criminal justice system that, as Brian Stevenson says, treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. My father would be outraged that we live in a nation now that 1 out of every 3 black people will be incarcerated in their lifetime. He would be upset that there is no difference between blacks and whites for using drugs or dealing drugs. In fact, young whites have a little bit higher rates of dealing drugs, but an African American is almost 4 times more likely to be arrested than someone that's white. My father would tell me that we've got work to do with this democracy, that here, after his generation fought for the Voting Rights Act and understood that they advanced voting rights, that now we are in a position in America where we have so much felony disenfranchisement that blacks are close to 3 times more likely to have their voting rights denied to them because of incarceration, mostly for those nonviolent drug laws. My father would be upset that we still have a nation that is poisoning its young, especially the poor, especially the minority, with more than 3 times the lead poisoning rates for black children than white children. My father would be astonished that we still live in an age where you are discriminated against just because of who you are, the color of your skin, the religion to which you pray for, or who you choose to love. With the violence against gays and lesbians and transgender Americans escalating, with 21 transgender women last year murdered just because of who they were, and most of them minority women. My father would tell me to go on and chase those big dreams, fight those big battles, correct the big wrongs, and that's how I tried to live my life. When I was finishing with my education, at a time my father was teasing me after I went to graduate school and law school and would look at me and say, "Boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. When are you gonna get a job?" My father was so pleased when I answered the call of a great American prophet. Some of you might have studied him in some of the advanced classes at this great university. That prophet's name is Chris Rock. He was pleased that, and Chris Rock says, "Why is it too often the most violent street in many cities is named for the man that stood for nonviolence?" And I moved on to Martin Luther King Boulevard in Newark, New Jersey, which in truth, even in the mid-90s, had screaming testimonies to the greatness of my city. Great universities like NJIT and Rutgers. Great university, county colleges like Essex County Colleges. Great high schools like Arts High and St. Benedict's. But on the south end of that street, when I moved there, it was in tough shape. Open air drug dealing like I had never seen. I moved next to an abandoned building used for drug use across the street from some projects. But I got to work trying to live my daddy's dream, live the ones that him and my mama planted in me to make a difference, to take on these big challenges. I began working with local tenant leaders, finding out the truth of what I learned, that, hey, I got my BA from a place like Stanford, but I get my PhD in the streets, in my community, with my people, from some of the greatest professors I ever met. Before you knew it, we were taking on slumlords, and before I knew it, I was being encouraged to run for office, and my dreams altered, and I won a city council seat, and I began to get so encouraged, and I moved into the projects across the street and lived there for 8 years, and during that time, I would run for mayor in 2002, and one small piece of advice, but I ran for mayor and I lost, and my advice is, if you're gonna have a spectacular failure in your life, sometimes it's good to have a documentary team there to capture it. And during the time, though, between my first run and loss for mayor and my work towards the second one, I was working hard, and this is the confession I want to make. I fear that I did not fulfill my father's dream. You know, I was watching the kids in my community during the 8 years I lived in these projects, I watched so many of these children grow up, and a group of men, young boys, used to hang out in the lobby. I'd come home at night and we'd hang out and talk, and I'd go upstairs, and they started seeing them over and over. These kids got older and older, and soon they were in high school, and soon when I was coming home, I smelled something in that lobby. I started smelling a familiar smell I hadn't smelled so pungently since I was in college. That lobby was full of marijuana, and I knew right away that the drug laws in this country are applied differently to those who are wealthy or privileged than those young black kids in the inner city. I knew they had no margin at all, and that if they made one small mistake and got caught, we have a criminal justice system that even a non-violent drug offense for doing things that the last 2 presidents admitted to doing, that can have you in a world where even when you come out of incarceration, you can't get a job, you can't get a loan, you can't get a Pell Grant, you can't get food stamps, you can't get public housing. And people wonder why we have recidivism rates over 5 years, over 70%. And so I decided to intervene with these young boys, and I started bringing them together and talking to them. I said, fellas, you know, we always talk in this lobby, but let's do something fun. Let's get out and do something. And they said, okay. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll take you to any movie you want to see. And I thought they chose a movie about home improvement because it was called Saw. But I tell you, I took them out to the movies. Before I knew it, I took them to the diner, brought friends of mine together with them, some guys that had been involved in the drug trade and gotten out before things turned tragic, who had stories to tell, and I started feeling good. We started to talk about mentoring programs and trying to connect these folks. But then I started to get busy. I got busy because I was chasing after my dream to be mayor of the city, and I confess to you today that I got so busy that I didn't follow through on the commitments I made. I didn't fix up them with the mentors, but the kids, they were so resilient. I'd come home on a long day of campaigning in 2005, and they would still be there. And these young men, they saw in me hope, and they would cheer me on as if I was one of their own. And I still remember them telling me, hey man, we got your back. We're gonna make sure everybody votes for you. And in my head, I just thought to myself, that's great, because when I become mayor, I'll be able to take care of these young people and people all over my city. They never gave up on me. Some nights I would come home weary from campaigning. One night I remember they had lawn signs they had gotten, and they were holding them up, and they were chanting my name with a title that I had dreamed about. They were saying, Mayor Booker, Mayor Booker. And as I walked in, I waved like I was walking through a parade. I had a little swagger, and the elevator doors in those projects opened. They rarely worked, but now those doors closed, and I just rose up. The elevator wasn't working, but they had gotten me so high until I thought to myself, wait a minute, where'd they get those lawn signs from? Those were expensive. Well, the election came and I won. I got the brass ring. I was the mayor of the city, a position of import, of power. I had influence over all things in the city. I felt good about myself. But in the day after I was elected mayor, and the days after, I had death threats. So they surrounded me by police officers. Before I knew it, they had police officers stationed in the lobby of Brick Towers, the projects I lived. It was the safest, in many ways, they had been in a long time. But I don't care who you are in your teenage years, you didn't hang out in areas where the cops hang out. Where they hung out. And so I didn't see these young guys in my lobby anymore, but I barely noticed because I was busy, I was important. I was rushing to go fight the fight of being mayor. I was sworn in, and I'll never forget that day, and I began my work right away. One of the biggest challenges in the city at that time was that violent crime was spiking, and I was running around the city. I would get notifications on my BlackBerry of where the shootings were, and I would run to the scene. Often the blood would be on the pavement or a body would still be there. I'd check in with the police, and I would begin to talk to the crowds there, telling them, this is not who we are. We're a better city than this. We're gonna rise above this. I would share my plans for prisoner reentry, for more police on the streets. I'd share my ideas. It would be street sermons by the mayor. I felt proud of myself, working around the clock with the force of will and a great team. But as I was running around in that first month, after I was elected, I was called to the scene of a shooting. I'll never forget, it was on Court Street in Newark, and I ran to the scene, and there was a body being loaded into an ambulance and whisked away, another one that was being covered. And I barely affirmed the humanity on the pavement. I didn't even check the name of another black man killed. I talked to the police, and then I went to talk to all those gathered. I ran around for the rest of that day, and I got home that night, and I sat on my bed and just started moving through my BlackBerry, looking at all the reports from the day, and then I saw the police report from the homicide earlier, and I stopped and I looked at it, and I saw the name was Hassan Washington, and I prayed that wasn't the name. I froze and I stared. The name was Hassan Washington. Say that name, Hassan Washington, because he was one of the boys from my lobby. And he wasn't just any boy from the lobby. He was the leader of the crew. He was the one that reminded me so much of my dad. He had charisma, strength of character. When I looked at him, I saw myself, or better yet, I saw my father. He, like my dad, was born poor. He, like my dad, was born to a single mom. He, like my dad, had his grandma raise him for a period of time. In fact, he lived 4 floors below me with my grandmother, with his grandmother. I'll never forget the day of that funeral. It is at a funeral home called Perry's Funeral Home. All the funeral rooms were on 1 floor, except for one was in the basement, and I tell you, I hated going into that basement. It was like walking into a bowel of a ship with narrow stairs, and I always felt like I was descending into the belly of that boat. And there was a packed room. We were piled in, one on top of another, moaning and groaning in grief, all assembled there to look at another American reality that happens all too frequently every single day. Another boy in a box. And I didn't feel mighty. I didn't feel mayoral. I didn't feel power that moment. I stood in the back of that room and felt ache and pain, and I felt shame. And people came over to me and shook my hand, and I found myself leaning on their light. But I confess to you, I couldn't take it. I didn't even stay for the ceremonies. I turned to the police officer assigned to my detail, and I said, "We're out of here." I charged out of that basement, got into my newly issued SUV, drove to the mayor's office, ran in, didn't take the elevators because I didn't want to look someone in the eye, ran up the steps into my office, and I slammed the door shut, and I sat on that couch, and for the first time as mayor of the city, I wept. And I kept thinking to myself over and over, that room was so packed, all of us were there for Hassan's death, but where were we? Where was I for his life? I kept wondering to myself that God had put this boy right on my doorstep, but I was so busy rushing for my big ambition that I failed to slow down enough and do for a young boy like the people in Hendersonville, North Carolina did for my father. I felt broken on that floor. But I tell you this, I've seen from my father that a failure is not final if you don't give up. That in our wounds there is wisdom, in our scars there can be strength. Even when life beats you down, those can be blessings. My father taught me very simply something that Alice Walker had said so powerfully when she wrote that the real revolutionary is always concerned with the least glamorous of things. With raising a reading level from 2nd grade to 3rd, with simplifying history and writing it down or reciting it for the old folks, with helping illiterates fill out food stamp forms for they must eat revolution or not, the dull, frustrating work of the black revolutionary artist. It means most of all being close enough to people when they need you. I want you to know, graduates, I'm proud to be a son of an Eagle, not for his professional accomplishments, not for the honors that he has received, but because of what my father brought into this world in every meaningful moment, and how he didn't miss an opportunity to do good for another. But I want to end with a note I learned from someone at that time when I was broken from another teenager's death. It's the words I want to leave with you. When I was hurting and painful, I came out of those projects I lived in early in the morning, and there was just one person standing there. And it was the tenant president of these buildings. A woman who showed me that love does not always leap canyons. Sometimes the greatest love, the most important love, is the one that is done through small actions. I saw this woman and she saw me hurting and in pain, and she just opened her arms wide and saw me, and she did exactly what I wanted. As she opened her eyes, as a little boy, I ran over to me. And she showed me in that moment the strength of a small action, because she just embraced me in her arms. And graduates, as she hugged me, she said 3 words that I want to leave you with today. She said 2 words over and over again, 3 times. And it's not about necessarily religion, but they're words that I've repeated over and over to myself to remind me to stay in this moment. Words I've repeated over and over when I get frustrated or tired and don't feel like manifesting my best. This elderly woman, at a time when I was broken-hearted and broken by circumstance, she hugged me and she said over and over again, stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful. Graduates, I say to you, stay faithful, because we have come this far by faith. Stay faithful, because you yourselves are the evidence of the faithfulness of your ancestors. You are the substance of their hopes and their dreams. Stay faithful. And you stay faithful in things large and taking on the world, but stay faithful in those things small, because remember, it's the small faith the size of a mustard seed that ultimately moves mountains. I want you to stay faithful, graduates, in the way that you were taught. Stay faithful in your character, stay faithful in your honor, because this world needs you, graduates. As you commence, the world is calling to you. Hear it. This country is calling to you. Heed it. But most importantly, there's someone calling you. The stranger, the imprisoned, the weak, the vulnerable. Hear that call too. And if you stay faithful in your response, you may not make the world as a whole change, but you will make a world of change to many people. God bless you. Stay faithful.